Good morning, everybody. So first of all, we'll introduce Jeni. Jeni Meade has had a very interesting route to her current role. As Colum would say, she came to Ireland for literature and she stayed for the Spuds. So Jeni came to study Anglo-Irish literature at Trinity. After a spell as in editorial, she then worked 12 years ago, I think it was, started working for Meade and is now the sustainability manager for Meade. And she's managed to pick up a first-class honours qualification from UCD on environmental sustainability along the way. So that's Jeni. Those of you who don't know, Meade Farm Group, been growing, packing, distributing premium quality and organic fruit, veg, salads. So it's a very large organisation and a big supporter of FoodCloud, become one of our key sustainability partners. So very pleased to have them here today. And then Colum Gibson, or I should say Dr. Colum Gibson, formerly a chemist, and now, please come on up, guys, and now an environmental consultant and a researcher with the Clean Technology Centre, and that's a not-for-profit based in Munster Technological University. He's manager of the EPA's business-focused food waste prevention work and extensive experience in the measurement of food waste and also the psychology of behavioural change to prevent food waste, which Odile spoke about earlier, to prevent food waste in the first place. He's also been involved in Savour Foods since its inception, and Savour Foods is a food waste reduction initiative specifically aimed for food businesses. If that wasn't enough, he also sits on the EU Food Loss and Waste Panel, and most importantly, for full disclosure, Colum's one of the founding board members for FoodCloud. And myself, I'm Sheena Forde, I'm Partnerships Director with FoodCloud. This is my first venture into not-for-profit, so prior to this I like to say 25, but I was calculating it last night, it's actually more like 30, unfortunately, years in supermarket retail and wholesale. Most of that as a food buyer, so I've worked in Ireland, the UK and Japan on food purchasing. So I spent a lot of time on factory floors, in farms, in abattoirs, in fields, looking at food. So I am acutely aware of the number of challenges facing small businesses, in particular small food businesses. And at FoodCloud and in this room, everybody's aware that just sustainability and sustainability management is just one of the challenges facing small businesses, whether it be Ireland or abroad. So we're aware that this is not the only thing by a very long way that you guys have on your agenda. So today we're going to talk about how food, with my two guests, we're going to speak about it's carrying on from what we heard from Brian and Odile earlier, but how can we measure food waste? How can we get started in food waste management and food waste reduction and in surplus food redistribution? And, there are many challenges facing the food industry. Jeni, no doubt, will talk about some of the climate issues that have affected them. One year it might be so dry that nothing will grow, and the next year it's so wet you can't get the carrots out of the field. So climate change is a never-present problem. Also, obviously, we've had the war in Ukraine. We've got full employability in Ireland as well, which makes it difficult to get the labour that many of you would need to run your businesses. And all of this leads to an ever-tightening of already short margins. So we're going to talk about hopefully cost-effective ways, but ways that you can use, monetize, and some particular examples, and Odile would have spoken about this earlier, ways that you can monetize your food waste and actually turn it into a positive for the business, not just a PR positive, but also a bottom line positive effect. So just finally, in terms of scene setting for ourselves, FoodCloud work with nearly 200 or over 200 food businesses across Ireland. And those businesses range from the likes of Meade Farm, who have a very clear sustainability strategy in place, who have clear targets in place, to those perhaps smaller food organisations where they have they've kind of a notion or a desire to do the right thing, but at the minute they're looking at food waste and not really sure where to start to really make a difference there. So there is a wide spectrum of skills and ability in this area. I'd also like to point out that we are not the only show in town, although it feels like it in the FoodCloud team. There are other complementary food donation, food surplus redistribution businesses within Ireland and internationally. So many of you will know Olio or Too Good To Go. And there's Fair Share in Kerry, for example. And I know many of our suppliers are also hooked up with local charities or local food banks, and they're donating in a less formal local way. So there's a lot going on in this space, a lot of businesses are working on it. But despite that number, the amount of us, the people who are here today, the amount of us who are involved in food redistribution, the truth remains, as Odile alluded to earlier, and Isla would have said at the start, it is only last year about 0.5% of our food actually got diverted from waste and got redistributed by the likes of FoodCloud. In 2022, that sum looked like 750,000 tonnes, so a massive sum, and 71% of that is represented by many of us in this room, which is the from farm to fork in terms of production, restaurants, food service. So I'm going to start off with my guests here, and I'm going to ask Colum the easy question to start, because I've heard him answering this one before, which is just to give us an idea of what does 750,000 tonnes of food look like. And I think I heard a novel way for you to describe that. So would you like to just help us visualise what 750,000 tonnes of food is?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sheena. So we do a lot of waste statistics work with the EPA, and waste statistics are very interesting if you're kind of into that stuff. But how do people on the street appreciate numbers like 700,000 tonnes of food waste? So I live in Cork City for my sins, and we have 3 or 4 days a week where we have bin trucks going up and down the road, and it drives me bonkers. And when we were putting the figures together for the waste characterisation study last year, I thought that maybe equating it to bin trucks was a very tangible thing. So just looking at some of the waste stats back from the waste collectors, we estimated that the 700,000 tonnes of food waste was the same as about 280 bin trucks a day, every day, driving up past my street. And I think that that's a very tangible thing that we can all appreciate. It's a huge number. In our households, we only see the small little bit that we put out on a regular basis. In our businesses, we do see it. Some people are very attuned to it, others are less attuned to it. And we have a fantastic waste management system which takes our materials away and handles them. But in the background behind this is 700,000 tonnes of food waste. Some of it is food waste, some of it is wasted food. I think it's a really important distinction that there is this edible food waste and inedible food waste element to it. So that's kind of how I equated it. I think it's a nice way of looking at it.
Yeah, so just remember that 200, and that was back in 2022 when we last had the figures. Unfortunately, I have a horrible feeling that when the next EPA figures come out, it'll be more than 200, more than 300 trucks a day. So staying with you, Colum, actually, just like to ask, you have a lot of experience of listening to and talking to food producers and manufacturers. And from your experience, what do you consider to be the most significant barriers and most significant obstacles in terms of measuring food waste and getting started on the journey of turning surplus food into redistributed edible food?
So I suppose there's 2 parts to that. There's the measurement part and there's the redistribution part, which of course are linked. Odile mentioned it earlier on. It's about making a start on data, and the whole premise behind the food waste charter and the protocol and the pathway for the service sector is to use data that businesses already have. Because of the cost and the obvious cost of energy, we tend to be very good at analysing energy data. Waste data, the bills, if you've looked at them, can be as confusing as some of the energy bills, but we tend not to interrogate them very much. So just an example from the food service sector, which I know we're not really speaking about today, they have a thing called gross profit, which is the gross profit associated with a meal, and the maths up to the point of putting stuff on the plate and serving it is very, very accurate. And yet they use a general waste number in there. And I think that this is indicative of a lot of what happens in businesses. We want our waste to be taken away. Yes, some businesses are really good at interrogating and investigating it, but small businesses, SMEs, businesses that don't have a tradition of doing it, that have evolved into the way they produce, that have evolved into the food supply chain, they see it as being just part of what they do. And I think there's an inherent kind of uneasiness / shame when it comes to food waste. We don't talk about it that openly. I was just saying to Eileen there earlier while Brian was speaking, to think that we're going to have statutory food waste requirements now. 10 years ago when we would have been talking about this, that was unimaginable. So yes, we've come a long way. I think we're far more open about discussing it than we were, as is evidenced today. But there is still the challenge of measuring on a consistent basis. And I think consistency is very important, and that's why the work that the EPA are doing on kind of national measurement standards is so important. That's the first thing. The second part is the donation element. I think it's crucial that when we think about the 230,000 tonnes that are assigned to the processing sector, unlike some of the other sectors, this is a hard number to put your finger on. It's, I believe, a combination of annual environmental report data and also CSO survey figures. It's not, I believe, as accurate as food waste is measured in the household, the food service and the retail distribution side, because we just haven't got that far as of yet. Yeah. There's also a lot of inconsistencies, or in the food service sector, there is a degree of consistency in terms of the provision of service. In food manufacturing, it is very, very different site to site. So we don't really know how much of that food is potentially sort of redistributable. So we have that barrier that we don't have very good information. We also have the fact that this is very good food. It's not food waste. We have to stop, I think, saying that it's food waste that's being redistributed. It's perfectly good food. We just have to figure out how to change the system. And that change will require people, it'll require time, it'll require investment and resources to get that food into the circle. And that part of it, I think, is a barrier. SMEs don't have the time and the resources to change. They may have an interest in doing it, but their business is a turnover of product. And I think that's a crucial barrier that we have to learn more about. So if we want to surmount it, I think we need to better understand the challenges and the barriers that exist for businesses. And that's why I think case studies and some of the great stories that are beginning to filter out are so important, because they will sort of evoke the possibility for businesses that want to do better.
Yeah, no, very good. And just, Jeni, I'm going to come to you with a few questions in a moment, but have you anything to add to that from your own experience in terms of barriers?
Well, I would echo Colum that, probably time and money are two of the biggest things. Now, we're extremely lucky that we've had a close relationship with FoodCloud for a long time. So in terms of, say, in-field waste, we have the gleaning program. And, that works out very well because we're located not too far from Dublin, where there's an active program. But, it'd be great to see that rolled out across all of Ireland in a bigger way. But we're lucky that we can tackle in-field waste, through the gleaning program and then through our donation program that has evolved in how we've done it. We've worked with FoodCloud to different ways to make sure that we get our surplus produce to them better. And now, we have a really good system that hopefully the Foodiverse system that everybody will pick up on. But in the past, the biggest barriers were someone to actually bring the surplus food, the courier. Initially, FoodCloud would send a courier down when we started working with them ages ago, or CrossCare, who was the original food bank we worked with. But that proved to be just a bit too costly for them, in terms of the efficiency of running of their organization. So then we started piggybacking some of our Dublin deliveries with surplus food deliveries to FoodCloud, and now we have the Foodiverse program, which has really changed things, because it means the charities are coming direct and picking up the produce from us. Now, those are the two main considerations, just the time and the labor to actually sort through what types of food waste we have, or surplus, it's out of spec or surplus food, and make sure that it gets to, a higher source. Those are probably the two biggest issues for us. But I will say that we're really lucky at Meade Farm, because it's all raw, it's raw fruit and vegetables. So I understand that a lot of food businesses have different issues. It's not as easy to redistribute.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say that, but you've also got the challenge of the very short life of the product, the perishability of the product. So it is a big challenge for yourselves.
It
as
is,
well,
and that's where Foodiverse has really, the grower Foodiverse program has really been a game changer, because it means that the soft fruits and things that would spoil in the time between it being taken to the Dublin hub and getting sorted and redistributed, that's eliminated now. Yeah. So we've got food charities in Navan that are enjoying blueberries on a regular basis, which is great.
Just for those of you who don't know, just to explain, thanks very much for that, Jeni. Foodiverse is our technology program, a platform that it links, in this case, a manufacturer, but I see many of our retailer partners in the room as well, but it links retail or the manufacturing site with charities in the local area. So the food has to be transported much less. It's less cost on the donor, and the product gets there much fresher to the charities as well. So it cuts out the middleman, means it doesn't have to be trunked through a third party. So thank you for introducing that, Jeni. So just in summary then, before I moved on to my next question, really common denominators, not surprisingly, I suppose, in terms of people, and we use volunteer support to assist with gleaning in the case of Meade Farm, and then it's transportation, it's how, and finding ways to surmount these issues, particularly with smaller food donors, to surmount these issues with them. And then, to Colum's point as well, is being forensic about the waste. What gets measured gets improved. You have to really understand what the issue is in order to be able to successfully either manage your waste or redistribute surplus food, perfectly edible surplus food for human consumption. So I'm going to come back to yourself there, Jeni, and one of the first questions I'd like to ask you then is, how did you organise your waste streams in the first place? Because I think that was one of your first steps, but how did you go about that in Meade Farm?
Well, from the get-go, our founder, Philip Meade Sr., just hated to see waste, as do all farmers. You work hard to produce something, you don't want to see it not going to to feed humans. So we started out where he actually just called a local charity back in the early 2000s, when we had more significant waste than he did when he was a sole trader, and developed a relationship with Vincent de Paul, and then that evolved, and we then started working as FoodCloud. From their inception, we actually started working with FoodCloud in kind of raising awareness around out-of-spec food and everything at the Feed the 5,000 back in 2013, I think it was. And so we had a relationship of donating to community food banks, where when we had, food that was within, that was fit for human consumption, and we started working on finding ways to channel that to other places, when anything that the food charities couldn't take, we would be channeling towards, sending for peeling, or for juicing, or eventually starch. And so we kind of have always just tried to channel the food into the highest possible use in the food pyramid. And I suppose we're just extremely lucky in that we have, we're in a very active agricultural area, so we're able to take any of our fruit and veg that is not suitable for consumption by humans. We're able to give that to a local licensed he's a cattle farmer, but he has a feed license, and he's able to treat that in such a way that, he can use it for stock feed. So it's better than, energy recovery, which is what a lot of food businesses end up,
Yes, yeah. So, a long history, and improving constantly as you go. And one of the things I'm particularly interested in is, how have you structured teams? So you're the sustainability sustainability manager, and I'm sure when Philip Senior there was no such thing when he was running his stall however many years ago. So how have you structured yourself people-wise in terms of sustainability? Does everything fall to you? Is it cascaded throughout the business, or physically, how are you structured?
Well, there's an ethos at Meade Farm of just wanting to avoid waste. So whether that be, buying heat exchangers so that, we're not wasting, heat or food or, potatoes, whatever. So it's kind of infused throughout the whole, it's that kind of farmer mentality. So, there's a lot of things. When I started working there was loads of really good things going on, and I just started kind of documenting them, and I saw that was around the same time that Origin Green came on board. So it was, made sense to put these, to put these into our plan. And so we've kind of, we have a great staff who's all kind of, trying to avoid waste all the time. We have a great platform now in Origin Green in terms of, it's very structured, and it gives you, you write down your targets, and it's been a super structure for us in terms of, pushing ourselves, not resting on, on our laurels or whatever. Like, in terms of, say, our food donations, we used to have a target, for, donations to FoodCloud, and they were always pushing us for them to be, higher and higher, which is great, and we did try to meet those targets, but then we realized that it's kind of disincentivizing using the produce, as much as we can in, preventing waste in the first place. So we had to kind of, rejig that, but we've done other projects where we can channel our food that way that have become targets in Origin Green. And I just think, in terms of, food businesses looking to, to have a framework or whatever, like, all between Origin Green being a super framework, and then just with the new regulations around, the CSRD and everything, like, there's a lot of great incentives to donate and to actually, spend a bit of money in the pack house to, repack things so that you can donate or whatever. There is incentives there in terms of what you get out of it in your CSRD, so it's always made a lot of sense. We're like all food businesses, we have tight budgets or whatever, but we've always found that, taking the time and the energy to put towards redirecting food is always worth it for us, Yeah.
Great, thank you. Very comprehensive there, and a lot of talk about Origin Green. There might be some people in the room who'd like to follow up on that with you, or indeed with Borbia. And we'll talk a little bit more, I think, about the CSRD, as we heard about from Odile and Brian this morning. So moving back to yourself, Colum, one of the actions that we spoke about, and it would have been spoken about by Angela earlier, is the idea of a voluntary target percent of edible food going to surplus. And you're very passionate about managing, monitoring and measuring correctly the food that you are currently wasting and the food that you could be moving to surplus. But for individual businesses, when they start measuring food waste, is it a good idea to set a target, or how would you go about setting a target?
That's a tricky one. I think it's a good idea to set a target, but we have to caveat that no more than our national data, which is improving, so too the data that a business their food waste data will improve over time. So they may set a target this year based on absolute reduction of food waste based on their numbers, and next year their numbers may be more because they filled the gaps, they've improved their data, and that's what Odile alluded to earlier on. That's the principle behind the measurement protocol with the charter, is that you start where you are today, and if you haven't been measuring it up to this point, that's fine, just make a start. Your data will improve because you're going to identify gaps, and you're going to realize that things are going in the wrong direction, because food waste segregation and waste segregation in general is quite poor at times. So yes, I think it's a good idea to start with a target. I wouldn't be too beholden to it as well. I think it's very important that we're realistic, that targets can change, that you can go back and retrospectively change them based on improved numbers. Getting numbers on food waste is tricky. In certain streams it'll be very obvious. In others, where you have mixed materials, it's much more challenging. Again, that'll be on a business by business level. With regard to the targets, I was actually thinking about this. Ultimately, prevention is at the top of the hierarchy. So yes, we want to see food being redistributed, but we have to also be realistic that over time, businesses are in the business of making money. And yes, of course, there's CSR and CSRD requirements and due diligence requirements, and there is that social governance part of it. But if food that's currently being donated today, a business realizes that they can valorize or they can prevent, then we have to accept that that's part of the business model as well. So yes, food surplus redistribution might be an important solution today, but if we can prevent it, then we have to accept that that's going to happen. So with regard to the target, I was wondering or thinking about, instead of setting specific targets, should be about targets moving the food up the food use hierarchy, because as Jeni just mentioned there, if you have food that's being redistributed and you put it into AD, then with energy recovery, then that's actually going down the food use hierarchy. And again, look, this is a conversation that we need to have. Businesses are trying to decarbonize. Is this, how do you decarbonize while you're moving your food down the food use hierarchy? So yes, I think it's good to start with the target. I think you have to be realistic. Don't set overly ambitious targets, because then they just become impossible. I would be more inclined to try and set realistic targets, and that's why the 10% that's set out in the Waste Framework Directive, I think, is a very good starting point. Many businesses might go above and beyond that. The other thing is about starting to measure. We were, as part of the dairy work that we've been doing, so the protocol has the basis is more or less the same, but every sector is a little bit different. So we've been tweaking the protocol to accommodate each of the different sectors with the advice that are then sent out to the seafood industry or the prepared food industry, or in this case, the dairy industry. And we were working with one particular business who had just started, and they were doing great stuff. And we wanted to include what they were doing as a case study about making a start. And they said, no. We don't have enough done yet. Our data isn't good enough. We haven't achieved enough. And our point to them was, this is really what we want. We want businesses to realize it's about making a start. But they didn't feel comfortable with that, sort of the insecurity that they had around their data, and consequently with regard to setting a target. And this is a barrier that we have to understand and somehow try and convey that, look, we need to overcome it.
Yeah, I know it's that the feeling that you wanted to be perfect, that you wanted to be ideally managed, and what is it, the old cliche of don't let perfection be the enemy of good. So yeah, and there's a really key point there is start where you are and make a start. Just go for it and set a target. And you can recalibrate as time goes on, and as you learn more about what's going on in your own business and what you could redistribute. So just back, Jeni, to yourself. I know I'm very interested when Colum talks about the hierarchy, and obviously prevention is key, and we all hate waste of any kind and want to prevent waste, and then valorising it where you can, and then redistributing for human consumption where possible. And we'll talk in a little moment, Jeni, about some ideas you have on valorising, which I think are very interesting. But before we do that, what are the key metrics in your business? How do you measure success? Because I couldn't agree more that there's no point in sending, you want to give more food to FoodCloud, you want to give more food to FoodCloud. If that means you're going to create more waste, then nobody wants that. But what now are your current measures of success?
I suppose, they started out with, donation levels to FoodCloud, but that, we revised that, and now it's more, how much we are valorizing and, putting to a higher level than say cattle feed, which was our baseline, for a long time. So we have targets around that, and the percentage that we do. It's tough, measuring. It can be difficult when you're not, like, say, in the field. We don't really know. Like we would have through FoodCloud's gleaning program this past harvest season, they would have valorized 7 tons of crops, not just ours. There were some other participants, but trying to measure the in-field loss can be difficult, and it can be difficult sometimes to catch all of the loss in the pack house, but our basic targets now are kind of around percentage of valorization out of the total of food that we have coming through.
So on that very subject then, I know you've had some interesting, and when margins are tight, it makes you more creative in terms of valorising. And you have an interesting example, I think, on potato starch, and how did that come about, or do you want to tell us about that?
That was just to try to, all the out-of-spec surplus potatoes, that were perfectly edible. We sent obviously a good bit for to FoodCloud where possible, and cattle feed, but we were still looking for, because it was a significant amount. So we were looking for a way to valorize that, and so we, through an innovation, program, developed the potato starch extraction. So we are now Ireland and the UK's only potato starch, indigenously produced potato starch, which is it's a great alternative to corn flour, and it's indigenous.
And who are your customers for that?
Mainly like food manufacturers. It's a binding agent, and it's a thickening and binding agent.
Yes.
So we're just kind of getting started on the retail, trying to convert everybody to potato starch, but stay tuned.
Well, it's so much better than animal-based thickeners. So very good.
And we also, we have done other. We had another research student work with us who was working on alternative for carrots, and that's something that we came up with a good product, but it's just a case of needing to kind of get the funding to make it worthwhile. These things are not, they wouldn't necessarily be huge money makers, but they're kind of, they're good ways to use produce. And then we also have, at the moment, we are part funding a doctoral student too, who's looking into using food waste as an edible coating for fruit and veg. So one of these days, if the packaging, directives come through and there's no single-use plastic in the fruit and veg sections, then we might have an edible coating that will help preserve and prevent wastage. So it's in early days, so keep you posted on that
all
one
this
too.
innovation, it's fabulous that, something so close to the primary product, such as Meade Farm, is coming up with all these wonderful new ways of valorising, preventing waste and valorising what you have got, what's unpreventable waste. So that's excellent. And I suppose just thinking about, before we got together today, just thinking about from my own experience within FoodCloud, and from speaking to smaller businesses, some of the challenges that we've heard mentioned, and you've mentioned some of them already, but the first, about redistributing surplus food is food safety and liability. So, how do we ensure that both parties, both who's donating the food and those that are receiving the food, are properly covered from a safety and liability? And obviously, within FoodCloud, we've got contracts with our donors, contracts with our charities to ensure that everybody is protected in terms of best practice for food safety, and that the liability is properly covered. Other areas are brand reputation. If something goes wrong, what does that do for my brand reputation? On the one hand, it's a balancing act, and then on the other hand, the really huge opportunity to shout about the PR and shout about the good that, for example, in valorisation, or in donating to food businesses the better use of that food. Some of the other challenges, ESG reporting and CSRD, and that's going to become the buzzword for 2025. And that's an area where support is needed by smaller, particularly smaller manufacturers. And obviously reducing the waste disposal costs in the first place. And that's something that FoodCloud can absolutely, if you can send surplus, perfectly good surplus food, then you're reducing your waste disposal costs. But have you anything, Colum, what's top of mind for you in terms of support for food businesses to help them redistribute to surplus?
I think Brian mentioned it earlier on about I suppose Food Circle is trying to investigate that. One of the things that Food Circle is going to do is to talk to both the donor side and the recipient side to figure out what are the challenges that exist. And a better understanding allows us, institute policy recommendations and hopefully policies that will mitigate those challenges. So I think a better understanding of that from an SME perspective. I know there's an awful lot of fantastically active people on the donation side of things, but as Angela mentioned earlier, on the Charter website, there are people who are already measuring but not donating, and similarly on the FoodCloud. So we have that gap at the moment, and we know that there's 230,000 tonnes as a best estimate. So even if you could get 1% or 2% of that would be a huge volume of food that is then being redistributed. We must remember those that need it, the most vulnerable in our society, and those experiencing poverty and food insecurity. So, there's a huge opportunity there. And just speaking about opportunities, a number of the state agencies have signed up to the Food Waste Charter, and we visited Teagasc last year, and we were just getting a tour, myself and Eileen were getting a tour, and the lady who was giving us a tour said, 4 or 5 years ago, the majority of new businesses, or businesses that were approaching us to look at options and opportunities, were looking at new product development. And she said now it's 80 or 90% of them that are coming to us are looking at valorization of currently raw materials. And just going back to what Jeni mentioned, we're much more aware. We're aware that these are resources that are being wasted, and there are opportunities to valorize them and hopefully put them back into the food system for human consumption. So, there's plenty of resources in the Food Waste Charter website. You've got Enterprise Ireland, another signatory who can provide preliminary funding for small businesses because they're time and resource poor. So they need help. And there are existing supports out there. But ultimately, we want, through Food Circle, I think, to better understand the challenges and what could be done. Again, it might be a Good Samaritan Act, it might be a taxation instrument that would facilitate donation. It might be, start-up funding to get over that barrier that Jeni mentioned at the start of going from where you are today to having a system, because you have to change the system. And that takes time and resources. So I think that's what we will explore through this project.
Yeah, that's excellent. So a better understanding of what's needed and the funding, and you've heard quite a few mentions today of the funding, and I'm sure we'll be of different resources online, and we'll be, I'm sure, sending that out in terms of all those different resources for anyone who's interested in that. So, Jeni, I will ask both of you this question, but I'll start with you, Jeni. In terms of, just as we kind of get close, because I do want to allow some time for questions at the end, what for you would be the key? So if you were thinking back to when you first started in Meade 12 years ago, what for you would be the key things, the key advice you would give to someone starting out on their sustainability path?
I'd say that looking at food waste or any kind of waste, as a potential opportunity versus a liability, and having the right mindset, because I think that's what's really helped Meade Farm is that, like, from the beginning there was this idea that of wanting to avoid waste and try to try to prevent it in the first place. And so I think that, like, if you have that mindset and you look at everything as, as a possible opportunity, then you kind of don't mind spending the resources or whatever, to pursue those things. And, some of the time you come up with good answers for it, and our relationship with FoodCloud has just been amazing. So if there could be, like, 10 more FoodClouds all around Ireland. I mean, the same, but, branches everywhere, to help other food businesses, translate move their surplus, to good causes. That would be great. But yeah, I'd say it's having the right mindset and just prioritizing it. And I do think that, a lot of the new legislation that's happening now, what's coming downstream, but, even Origin Green is always pushing you, you hit a target and then they want you to recalibrate it and, try harder. And I think that's brilliant, and all of that, like, it does cost money sometimes, but and sustainability costs, and that's, one thing we have to all be cognizant of, but it also, it brings rewards, in a lot of other ways that we just need to recognize. So I think it's, probably having the right mindset and networking and just staying in touch with people to try to, promote that circular economy. Circulaire is a great organization for that. And even just like we're members of the Boyne Valley Food Producers, and an organization like that is great. There's always people saying, oh, I've got, I need this packaging. Oh, I have some surplus here. You can, buy this off me for, cost price or whatever. It's that kind of networking that's really important, and that opens up other opportunities for your business as well. So
yeah, no, that's fantastic. And Colum, asking you the same question, do you have anything to add in terms of the takeaways for this group or what they can pass on to others?
Yeah, I was going to say nothing, but that's hard for me.
It's from Cork.
Kerry. Opportunity, and we're fierce networked in Ireland. We're unbelievably connected. We're only 5 million people, and we all know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And if you go around the room today, as I think Brian or maybe Angela mentioned earlier on, we all know food businesses that we could go out and knock on the door, and a lot of us will work with businesses on a day-to-day basis. But this food donation aspect may not be a topic that comes up. So I think we all have an ability to kind of to do something with the opportunity that's there. I remember years ago, myself and Odile, we were the food waste stats came out, and I think the food waste stats were saying that Ireland was the second worst country in Europe for wasting food, and our argument was that we were actually the second most honest country in Europe when it came to food stats. And I think we have made unbelievable progress. You look at the 220,000 tonnes that are at the household level, that has come down quite a lot from 350,000 tonnes or 340, I can't remember, 10, 15 years ago. So we are making progress. I think we're a small country, we're unbelievably networked, we're a food agrarian society. We have great opportunity to become absolutely really good in this area. We have a huge way to go, no doubt. Obviously the climate implications at a global level, are huge, but we can only do our part. And I think we have a great opportunity to do it, but we need to make a start, and we need to promote the good stories as well. I think, look, we're an oral tradition. We love chatting, we love stories, and I think they're probably our greatest ally in this if we can harness them.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much. So just before I say, I thank my guests and hand over for questions to you. Just some of the key call-outs that I've taken from our chat today was, as Colum's ended up there with networking, and there are lots of opportunities for networking. There are lots of food producer groups. There are forums for groups to get together in a non-combative way. Origin Green, really positive experience with Origin Green for yourself. For EI, there's lots of information on the EPA website as well. I mean, there's lots of information there. Food Circle, that's, as Angela spoke about, that's why we're launching this initiative with the government support, but to try and address and to try and help you, particularly the SMEs, but also hoping to help the larger businesses as well to just improve and to move along that food hierarchy, to valorise, to prevent waste in the first place, but then to valorise then human consumption and animal consumption before we get to the end of the line, which is landfill. Also the measuring and,
start where you are. It's very good advice. Start where you are and measure and put a plan together, and that certainly worked well for Meade Farm. And shout about, I mean, there's no harm in shouting about the good work that you're doing and sharing those ideas with others within your network and others within the industry. So there's some of the key call-outs, but there's so much else that I personally got out of that conversation. So thank you both very much. So I'll give you a round of applause and then we'll open for questions.